A Second Chance, a short story by Zakira Shure, Layla's perspective. Layla had always prided herself on being independent. Ever since she could remember, she had done things her way. Her grand entrance into the world a prime example. The doctors had marked her due date for August 7th, but Layla had made her debut 2 weeks early on July 15th. Even at birth, she decided when things would happen. She wasn't a stubborn person. She was simply ambitious, driven, and determined to make things happen on her own terms. Now fresh out of college and working as an engineer by day while building her side hustle, decorative wooden letters for marriage proposals, Layla was balancing two worlds. Her engineering career was solid, but it was her side business that had her dreams soaring. The letters with lights, her signature touch, had become a hot commodity, and Layla found herself overwhelmed with orders. From local proposals to extravagant destination events, demand for her unique creations was off the charts. Her friends Britt and Taylor suggested she outsource some of her carvings to keep up with the workload. But Layla wasn't so sure. She liked to keep the craftsmanship personal. It was her thing. But with her dream project just around the corner, setting up a proposal for a famous artist, Yaz, in Paris, she was seriously considering it. That's when she ran into Blake. It wasn't the first time they crossed paths. Layla had met Blake when she first interned at Unity Construction Incorporated. He had been her supervisor, a graduate just a few years ahead of her, strict and focused and to the point of being almost cold. Blake was all business, no pleasantries, no smiles. Layla, the bright and bubbly one, had found his militant nature stifling. He never laughed at her jokes, never lightened up, never seemed to take anything outside of work seriously. She hated working under him, feeling like he was constantly judging her ideas, dismissing her suggestions without a word. But eventually, Layla was moved to a new department, and she left Blake behind. Now here she was in Home Depot, standing face to face with him as he reached for a stack of plywood. Blake? Layla asked, unsure if it was him. It had been years, and he looked different. The cold, stern expression was still there, but his features had softened somehow. His eyes were still the same, though a deep brown that made her stomach tighten in ways she wasn't prepared for. Layla? Blake's voice was rough, his surprise evident. What are you doing here? Layla took a step back, still processing. I'm working on a project. I didn't expect to run into you. How's everything? Blake shrugged, his expression still unreadable. It's good, busy, you know how it is. Yeah, I do, Layla chuckled awkwardly, but Blake didn't join in. The conversation was brief. Blake was still as stoic as ever, and Layla found herself frustrated by his lack of warmth. She wanted to ask why he was always so distant, but the words never came. Instead, they parted ways, and the encounter left her with an unsettling feeling, one that only grew as she boarded the plane to Paris for Yaz's proposal. In Paris, Layla's excitement was overshadowed by the sheer weight of the project. Yaz was a well-known artist, and his lavish proposal was the event of the year. Layla had been tasked with designing the oversized wooden "Marry Me" letters, and the pressure to get everything perfect weighed on her shoulder. The whole setup needed to be flawless, but there was one thing keeping her distracted. The man she had been speaking to over the phone for weeks, Yahim from Ford Building Incorporated, who had agreed to help her with some of the logistical work. Yahim had been a welcome change from the aloof Blake. Their late-night phone calls were filled with laughter, shared experience, and easy camaraderie. Yahim was funny, charming, and surprisingly open, revealing things to Layla that he hadn't told anyone else. They had developed a rapport that felt like it had been years in the making. She found herself looking towards their calls, and as they talked about the big event, the connection between them deepened. Both of them were in anticipation to meet in person. But when Layla arrived in Paris, everything went according to plan, except for the one thing she was waiting for, meeting Yahim. She had been so busy with the setup and making sure everything was perfect that the time slipped away. The event went off without a hitch. Yas proposed to his girlfriend under the starry Parisian sky, and Layla's "Marry Me" letter stood tall, glowing with lights. The clients were thrilled, and Layla was proud of the work she had done. But there was still one thing left to do: meet Yahim. After the event, they decided to meet under the Eiffel Tower at 9 p.m. sharp. Layla was nervous. What if he wasn't what she expected? What if the connection they built over the phone didn't translate in person? She looked at her watch. It was 8:59 p.m. She could barely breathe. Her phone buzzed with a message from Yahim. "I'm wearing a green coat. See you soon, Layla." She read it and smiled to herself, feeling a flutter of excitement. The clock struck 9 and the lights on the Eiffel Tower flickered to life. Layla scanned the crowd, heart pounding. A figure in a green coat appeared, walking toward her. "Layla?" The voice was unmistakable, but it was not Yahim's. It was Blake's. She froze, confused. "Blake?" Blake smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's Yahim. I go by my last name in work settings." He stepped closer as if sensing her confusion. "Yahim's my first name." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The warmth in his eyes now made sense. The moments of vulnerability shared on the phone, the easy laughter, it was all him. Blake, the man she had once despised for being so cold and distant, was actually someone entirely different. For the first time, Layla saw Blake not as her supervisor, but as Yahim, the man who had shared pieces of his life with her, and the man who had somehow found his way back into her heart. Before she could say anything, Yahim took a step closer and pulled Layla gently toward him. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. In that moment, Layla felt her heart soften, her walls fall, and the space between them disappear. Layla's mom had always said, "What's meant for you will always find its way back to you." As she stood under the Eiffel Tower with the city of love surrounding them, Layla realized how true those words were. She hadn't just found herself in Paris. She had found him, Yahim to be exact. And maybe, just maybe, he had found her too.